At the start of the pandemic, there was one government out there not made up of sheeples for the sheeples. But the Swedish experiment was judged early on as a disaster. That was the Time magazine. The World, a cautionary tale by the New York Times. Deadly Folly, The Guardian. And in Germany, Focus magazine described the policy as sloppiness. Italy's La Repubblica concluded the Nordic model country had made a very dangerous mistake. But these countries, all countries, including the Ardern-controlled New Zealand, were also conducting an experiment, and that they were testing unprecedented measures to prevent the spread of a virus. Sweden simply chose one path, the rest another. The hypothesis of the outside world was that Sweden's freedom would be very costly. The absence of restrictions, open schools, reliance on recommendations instead of mandates, and police enforcement would result in higher deaths than in other countries. Meanwhile, the lack of freedom endured by the citizens of other countries would in fact save lives. Many Swedes were persuaded by this hypothesis. Shut down Sweden to protect the country, wrote Peter Walansky, perhaps the country's most powerful journalist. Renowned infectious disease experts, microbiologists and epidemiologists from all over the country warned of the consequences of the government's policy. Researchers from Uppsala University, the Karolinska Institute and the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm produced a model powered by supercomputers that predicted 96,000 Swedes would die before the summer of 2020. Gee, Professor Henry would feel really at home there, wouldn't he, eh? Wherever you go, they can never get it right, eh? Now, at this stage, it was not unreasonable to conclude that Sweden would pay a high price for its freedom. Throughout the spring of 2020, Sweden's death toll per capita was higher than most other countries. But the experiment didn't end there. During the year that followed, the virus continued to ravage the world, and one by one, the death tolls in countries that had locked down began to surpass Sweden. Britain, the US, France, Poland, Portugal, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Spain, Argentina and Belgium, countries that had variously shut down playgrounds, forced their children to wear face masks, closed schools, fined citizens for hanging out on the beach and guarding parks with drones, have all been hit worse than Sweden. At the time of this being written, more than 50 countries have a higher death rate if you measure excess mortality for the whole of 2020. Sweden, this is according to Eurostat, will end up in the 21st place out of 31 European countries. If Sweden was part of the US, its death rate would rank number 43 of the 50 states. And those who followed Sweden's example have also come in for a lot of criticism. When the state of Florida, more than a year ago, and strongly inspired by Sweden, removed most of the restrictions and allowed schools, restaurants, leisure parks to open, the judgment from the American media was very swift. The state of Republican governor was predicted to lead the state to the morgue. It's the New Republic. The media was outraged by images of the Floridan swimming and sunbathing on the beach. I can imagine, like, here we are, all those other states being locked down like New Zealand, with the fear of God being put into you, and the cops looking at you, and even the Prime Minister saying to the head teachers, oh, well, if someone comes on to your school grounds, a teacher who's not been vaccinated, call the police immediately and have them removed forcibly. Eh? That's New Zealand, like the rest of these other countries that have completely fallen flat on their face. But in Florida, as in Sweden, it's worked out just fine. But it seemed that no one even thought for a moment that past experience, past experiments, past knowledge is that they knew that herd immunity has always worked with other viral infections and not with COVID-19 apparently. What's the difference? Sweden surely had a reasonable answer, and it became very, very clear as time went on. They offered protection, gold-plated protection, economic and social support to those who needed it, not imprisoning the entire population while creating a class of drivelling-mouthed, weak-willed informers. What a truly ugly society we have seen, generated by lockdowns. But it does show one thing, that we have a real ugly underlying trait in New Zealand where we now have people who will prevent an unvaccinated person entering their property or their workplace. That to me is so bloody childish, so bloody stupid, and in fact I would even go to say ignorance of the first order. Also, people have rights. They don't, however, in any liberal democracy have the right to trample all over the rights of others, simply because they may be, just at this moment in time, be a majority.